It's time to put your health in your own hands. Get ready to learn from today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. Now, here's your host.
This information is not intended to provide diagnosis, treatment, or medical advice. Products, services, information, and other content provided in this broadcast, including information that may be provided in this broadcast directly or by linking to third-party websites, are provided for informational purposes only. Please consult with a physician or other healthcare professional regarding any medical or health-related diagnosis or treatment options. Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, John Suzuki. John has successfully consulted for many top medical devices, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical companies in various scientific and technical roles. Due to his own health challenges, John became aware that higher consciousness can have a more profound effect on healing the human body than conventional allopathic medicine. His research to elevate his consciousness led him to Guruji Mahendra Kumar Trivedi and the Trivedi Effect in 2010. After receiving Guruji Trivedi's remote energy transmissions, John's life transformed on all levels, including enhanced physical health. Through John's association with Guruji Trivedi, he discovered and developed his own natural ability to harness and transmit healing energy known as biofield energy treatments. His holistic healing power has been validated by scientific research using international cell-based and animal models. The results that have been published in peer-reviewed scientific journals suggest that John's biofield energy treatments can improve human health and the quality of life. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Tammy, for having me this morning.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about sleep. It seems like thousands, if not millions of people have sleep problems around the world. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So can you give me a big, broad overview of the scope of sleep problems around the world?
Yes, I'd love to do that. I think the first thing that we need to understand is sleep is a sleep problem is a universal problem that everybody across the world is experiencing. It doesn't matter if you're just here in the United States. So it's definitely universal. I think the most important thing to understand is the sleep studies that have been done have shown that it is a worldwide issue. And in particular, what I'd like to talk about is the in-depth World Health Organization's SAGE sleep study. And that study was conducted with 8 different countries in Africa and Asia. And that study was actually published in the journal Sleep. So this is a bona fide scientific study. And what they found was that about 16% of the 40,000 participants that they surveyed basically reported severe sleep problems during the survey time. So we know from our own experiences, studying sleep for many years, that the lack of sleep can lead to many physical problems and medical problems that we see. So it's a very, very important issue. And we know because of chronic illness that sleep is very important in healing from chronic illness. So if you have problems with sleep, it'll be very difficult to heal from any type of chronic illness.
So in the United States, is it as big an issue as it is in other places around the world?
I think it's actually, in my perspective, it actually might be worse in the United States because of the way we are as a society now. We're so tuned in to, constant go, traveling, using our cell phones, using remote technology. So I think it's actually worse in the United States. The CDC published a study in the journal called Morbidity and Mortality Weekly. It's a weekly report that gets published by the CDC. And they showed that in February of 2016, that about 1 in 3 Americans don't get enough sleep. And I believe the study shows that they define not enough sleep is typically less than 7 hours a night. So that translates into about, over 83 million people. So, this problem of sleep is actually probably more common than most people would, tend to admit.
I've heard different people say, what is it about staying up? You can sleep when you're dead or something like that. But is lack of sleep actually is something like you mentioned earlier that it can exacerbate different types of illnesses. Why is the lack of sleep so bad for humans?
Well, I think medically speaking, the things that we've learned over time based on what's been published in the scientific journals is, sleep can affect just about every aspect of your life. And so in terms of just with the brain itself, the lack of sleep can cause memory problems. So, any simple activities that you do that require, your memory can be affected by the lack of sleep. We know that, let's say, for instance, you're a student. We know in the area of learning that the lack of sleep reduces the ability to learn new things. And you say, well, what's the big deal? Well, if you're a student, or if you're going to college, or you're in high school, or you're in grammar school, or even preschool, the lack of sleep is going to impact on your ability to retain and learn things. So it's very, very important. From a business perspective, we need to understand that the lack of sleep reduces productivity at work. And, as a business owner or someone who works in a corporate environment, let's say you're managing a division or a manufacturing site, one of the things that you have to be very sensitive to is the productivity of your employees. And if a large number of employees are having sleep issues, their productivity is going to be, much less. And, that will impact the bottom line, the dollar, amount that the company is, trying to manage. So it's very, very important, even from a work perspective. From a health perspective, we know that the lack of sleep has been associated with a number of medical issues. So we know in the neurological area, we found that the lack of sleep increases your risk of these neurological diseases, ranging from depression to dementia. And we know now that, for instance, in the area of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, that sleep is very, very important in terms of your cognitive abilities and your cognitive function over time. We also know that from a metabolic perspective, that the lack of sleep increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. And right now we have a huge epidemic of, essentially blood sugar dysregulation, especially type 2 diabetes. So, it's an important function of the body to get enough sleep so that we can, regulate the metabolism that's so important for blood sugar. We also know that there is also an increased risk in obesity based on the lack of sleep. And, some of the latest studies that have been published by the CDC has noted that there's been a tremendous increase in obesity across the United States. And that, is also a risk factor for other diseases that we have, including neurological disease, including heart disease, and including cancer. We also know that there is an increased risk in high blood pressure and other cardiovascular markers from the lack of sleep. So, it pervades all aspects of the medical community, not just in the area of, Alzheimer's or neurological disease or even just diabetes, but also cardiovascular disease. As I pointed out earlier, there's also an increased risk in cancer from the lack of sleep. And it's interesting, there have been some studies done with people who work third shift, who basically are working instead of sleeping when they would typically be sleeping. And they notice that there is an increased risk in several types of cancer when you're not sleeping at night. And part of that has been attributed to the lack of a hormone called melatonin in the body that occurs typically at night. And then lastly, I think, with the baby boomers, that's so important. There's a big emphasis now on the area of anti-aging and premature aging. And we know from long-term sleep studies that the lack of sleep, basically induces premature aging, which is what most people don't want. So, from a medical perspective, the lack of sleep covers, all the systems of the body, and it's very, very important. It's interwoven and tied into, all aspects of our health. So, we need to pay attention to this issue because it's so important for human health.
Wow. I mean, who would think that, sleep would be that important? I can understand that about the people who work those odd hours, those third shift workers. And I often wonder what companies are thinking when they have people, say, work a day shift one week and a night shift the next week, and they change their hours up, because that would seem to be something that would be very disruptive for humans. So biologically, what is your body doing when you're sleeping?
I think, at the highest level, I think the most important thing for a person to understand is that sleep basically provides a restorative or healing function to the body. So anytime that we lack sleep or we don't get enough sleep, it's impacting on the ability of the body to heal itself and to restore or balance it. So in terms of the brain, we know that sleep is very important metabolically to balance all these, reactions that are going on in our brain. So that's, one of the most important functions of sleep, at least for the brain. In terms of the whole body, we know that sleep is designed to balance or basically bring us into this concept called homeostasis. And homeostasis basically is just the ability for the body to balance all systems in the body, everything from hormones to blood sugar levels to waste disposal to regeneration to providing nutrients to various aspects of the body. So that's one of the most important functions of sleep at night. We also know, which is very interesting, this was only discovered just recently, that at night the brain is actually detoxified through a system of lymphatics called the glymphatics. And these were recently discovered, I believe, in the last couple of years. There was an interesting article published about this. And basically what they found was that at night, the brain actually shrinks a bit, and it allows the fluid that circulates around the brain to collect all the metabolic waste products that have been accumulated during the day, and it's transported through these glymphatics, which is this lymphatic system in the brain, so that it can be filtered by the kidneys and the liver and other parts of the filtration system in the body. So that's a really important aspect of sleep that we didn't know about until just recently. And then lastly, I think there's been a lot of scientific work done in the area of during sleep. One of the most important functions of sleep for humans is that it helps with this area called memory formation. So a lot of the both short-term and long-term things that we are acquiring, learning, being exposed to are actually processed at night while we sleep. So it's important, for our ability to, process this information that we gather during the day, and it's all processed at night. And by doing this, it allows us to store the information and then be able to be more productive during the daytime. Basically, it's integrating everything that it has been put together and then the next day it's available to us to use at our disposal. So again, this process of sleep is not a passive thing. It's an active thing that goes on at night. And anytime we lose, essential sleep, we can impact on these processes.
Wow, that's really phenomenal. I didn't know that they'd discovered that. I was laughing to myself, the glymphatic. He was so glymphatic about it. It was just, the words are just funny. So
right.
Tell me more about the recommendations for the optimal number of sleep, and how can you tell whether or not you're getting enough sleep every night?
Well, it's interesting. Probably over 100 years ago, or even longer, when we didn't have lights and we didn't have all this automated technology, people used to go to bed when the sun went down, and used to wake up very, very early in the morning. And these days now, because of our fast-paced lifestyle and all the technology that we have, we don't typically get the amount of sleep that our grandparents and people, 100 to 150 years ago were getting. So right now, the typical recommendations from the sleep experts is typically for adults between the ages of 18 to 60. They recommend anywhere from about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Okay, for people who are over 65, they found that they need a little bit less sleep. And so that recommendation for people over the age of 65 is typically 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. And for individuals who are under the age of 18, and this includes everything from newborns up to high school students, they typically need anywhere from 9 to 14 hours of sleep at night. And I can say, based on my own personal experiences and talking to people and working with clients, that most people don't get that amount of sleep. I mean, it's actually staggering when you talk to people about how little sleep they do get. So, it's difficult in this day and age because of, like I said, the technology and the fast-paced lifestyle for people to sleep. There are just always, more things that you can do, more things that you want to achieve. There's always another phone call, always another text message that you can do. So it's difficult for people to, get the actual amount of sleep that they need. And I think it's interesting. One of the easiest ways, you don't have to go through a very complicated medical process. You could go to a sleep doctor and spend lots of money and time, to have your sleep analyzed. But I think there are some simple things that you can do to actually gauge if you're getting enough sleep at night. So I think the easiest thing to do is just, the next day, determine the amount of sleepiness that you have. That's a good first indicator of whether or not you got enough sleep the night before. And in some people, you might have several nights where you haven't got enough sleep, and it might take you more than one day or 2 days to get back the amount of sleep that you are actually missing. So that's one thing that you can do very simply without spending a lot of time and money to gauge whether or not you've had enough sleep the night before. The other way that you can measure, whether you've had enough sleep is you can do simple things like, okay, do I need to take a nap today? I'm so tired, that I need to take a nap. The other thing is you can say, okay, do I need caffeine or a cup of coffee to make it through the day? So these are other indicators that you can use to determine if, in fact, you've received enough sleep the night before. So it's very easy to do, and it's a great way to track whether or not you need to, spend more time sleeping.
Yeah, it sounds like you can do very simple things, and obviously your body is telling you, if you need a nap, it's telling you, hey, I didn't get enough sleep last night, and so maybe you can start paying attention to that. So what are the 3 most common types of sleep problems that most people experience?
Okay. The most common types of sleep issues that most people experience. And again, these are the most common. There are other, types of sleep issues, but these are the most common ones that are typically reported by most of the sleep experts. So the first one is difficulty falling asleep at night. And, you can picture in your mind of, laying down on the bed and your eyes are, wide open. You've got the lights off, you're staring at the ceiling, and you just can't go to sleep. You're just, I use the term wired. You're wired and you're so, so full of adrenaline and strung out that you can't relax and you can't go to sleep. So that's probably one of the most common forms of sleep issues that people have. The second one, which is actually pretty common, is you can go to sleep. Let's say your normal sleeping time is 10 or 11 at night, and you can lay down and go to sleep. But after, several hours or in the middle of the night, you wake up and then you can't go back to sleep. And that's a very common problem as well that many people have. So, they don't have this issue of difficulty falling asleep. But let's say, maybe at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll wake up. And for whatever reason, they can't go back to sleep no matter what they do. So I've heard stories of individuals who, wake up at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and are wide awake until, their alarm goes off in the morning, like at 6 or 7 in the morning. So that's the second most common form of sleep issues that we see. And then the last one, which is probably not as common, but it still happens quite a bit, and that is where you can go to sleep at your normal time. You can, let's say you want to sleep 7 or 8 hours, and you do that, but when you wake up in the morning, you still feel tired. And I've heard people say that, I went to bed, I slept 8 or 9 hours, and I woke up and it felt like I didn't get any sleep. So that's another type of sleep issue that's not as common as the other two previous forms, but it's still common. And, it can be very debilitating for people because, you're even though you've received your 8 hours or 9 hours of sleep or whatever your amount is, you still feel tired. And it's like you could sleep more and, you might even need to have a nap during the daytime. So those are the three most common types of sleep problems that most of the people that I talk to and that even myself have experienced, at some time in my life.
Can you tell me a little bit more about some of your personal experiences with sleep problems during your lifetime?
Oh yeah, I still occasionally have some minor issues, but most of the time, the most, I think the common one that I've experienced, and it usually only occurs when I'm traveling, especially when I'm, going across, multiple time zones. But that's basically, not being able to go to sleep. And that's happened, when I was younger, quite a bit when I was traveling. So, I try to go to sleep at, let's say the destination point was 2 or 3 hours different from where I'm living. And I try to go to bed at that time and, I couldn't go to sleep. So that was something that I'd experienced, when I was younger, quite a bit when I was traveling. When I was in my 40s, I experienced this period where I would go to bed at my normal time, like 10 or 11 o'clock, and I'd wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So that was a very common, issue. And I noticed that mostly in my 40s. And there's some specific reasons why, but, that was a interesting time period. And that can be very disconcerting, when you have to get up in the morning and you have to be refreshed and you've got a lot of activities and things you have to do, in your business or if you're an employee. So that was, the second issue that I experienced. And then I've also experienced when I was in my 40s, I had some episodes where I would go to sleep at night and get my full, 7 or 8 hours of sleep, and I would wake up and still feel tired. And I mean, that's a really depressing feeling, when you spent so much time sleeping, you expect to be refreshed when you wake up in the morning. And when you wake up, you don't. So, that's the third area. So if I've experienced all these three types of sleep issues that most people have experienced, during their life.
Yeah, I think everybody has a little bit of trouble sleeping every now and then, but when it becomes, chronic, I guess that's when you really
Right.
start
I,
wondering.
yeah. I
So,
mean, for me, even if I experience, 2 or 3 days of a sleep issue, it can be debilitating.
yes,
Really, it throws your whole clock and cycle, and your productivity off.
yes. So, how can you improve your sleep? Are there any simple things that you can do to improve your sleep patterns?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that you can do to improve your sleep hygiene. That's the word I like to use. And it encompasses, a whole wide area of things. But there are many things that you can do simply to improve your sleep hygiene. So one of the things that you can do is you can sleep in complete darkness or as close to it as possible. So I've heard of cases of people, they buy these block out curtains or liners for their curtains to keep light out. That can be done. That's easy to do. Another thing that can be useful that they've shown in the sleep studies is not to have the temperature too high in your bedroom. So typically they recommend, temperature, not a temperature above 70 degrees. So if, you need to do something to keep the sleep environment comfortable, and they found that typically people who have cooler temperatures can sleep a lot better than if it's very, very warm in the room. So that's something that you can do. And you may have to modulate that, maybe by opening a window or closing a window, but doing whatever you need to do to do that. The next thing you can do, which is relatively simple, is to minimize sound pollution. Okay, and that sounds like something that you can't do, but even if you live in an environment where sound pollution is a problem, for instance, you could live near a large freeway or access way, and you can hear cars and trucks at all hours of the night. So one of the recommendations that you could do is to get some earplugs and use that to improve your sleep quality and sleep hygiene. So that's something you can do very easily. The next thing that I think is probably overlooked today, and then part of it has to do with the technology and this fast-paced society that we live in, but that is to reduce electromagnetic fields in your bedroom. So that means from your TV, from computers, from your cell phone, from iPads, from any other devices that have computers in it, they can give off electromagnetic radiation. They can have Wi-Fi connections, which can all disrupt or hamper your ability to sleep. So that's something else that can be done. The other thing you can do is to follow a regular schedule or routine and try to get to bed at about the same time every night. That really helps with your body, because we know that the body is a biological system. There are chronobiologic processes. In other words, there are processes that are based on time and timing, based on either the moon or the sun. So it's important to try to get into that regular routine. Another thing that you can do to prevent you from waking up and getting up at night is to avoid drinking liquids about 2 hours before bedtime. And that can help tremendously if you have to get up to go to the bathroom at night. Another thing that you can do that for me, I think this is very, very important, is you should try not to eat anything 3 hours before your bedtime. And you ask, well, why should you do that? Well, one of the reasons is that it'll allow you to digest your food before you go to sleep. And so it'll be much easier to fall asleep and stay asleep if you don't have food in your stomach at night. So that's something that I highly recommend. The other thing that you can do, and we briefly alluded to this, is avoid any TV or computer screens before bedtime. And one of the reasons is there's blue light typically in TV and computer screens and also in cell phones. And the blue light stimulates a part of your brain to tell you that it's daylight. So that can prevent you from going to sleep. And then there are some other simple remedies that people I've heard talk about and can be also helpful for helping with your sleep hygiene. And that is to take a hot bath or shower before you go to sleep. Sometimes that helps relax you so that it's easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. And then lastly, one of the things that you should try to do is try to stop any work at least an hour or so before you go to bed. And that is to allow the brain and the mind to unwind and to calm down before you go to sleep. So that's a helpful recommendation that you can use, for sleep hygiene. So I guess in summary, these are all very straightforward and simple things you can do. They don't cost money. You're probably going to do these anyway. Just have to adjust the time and some of the behaviors that you use, before you go to sleep.
I think that was a really good list of simple tips that you can do to help you fall asleep. And I know for a fact that those weird little blue lights on your electronics, I have a little tiny blue light on one of my surge protectors. And if I don't have it covered up, it wakes me up in the middle of the night. Because all of a sudden I'll wake up and that little blue light it appears like the whole room is illuminated with this. I mean, it's probably the size of a pencil tip, but yet it's whatever that color and that light, it really affects me. So what has been your experience with the Trivedi effect and sleep issues?
Since being involved with the Trivedi effect and receiving the energy transmissions, some of the things I've noticed is that it's a lot easier for me to fall asleep at night. So that's one thing that I've noticed. And, it didn't happen, instantly, but it's happened over a period of time from receiving the energy transmissions. I no longer wake up in the middle of the night. And even if I do wake up, I find it's very easy to fall asleep, once I do wake up. So that's a tremendous benefit from, receiving the energy transmissions. I also noticed that my sleep is much deeper, and when I wake up, I feel refreshed. Now, in the past, many years ago, I told you about, I've had periods where I went to bed and got 8 hours of sleep, and I woke up and I still didn't feel refreshed. So that's been a major improvement. I think one of the other things that I actually noticed, which is actually very interesting, since receiving these energy transmissions, I noticed that with the Trivedi effect, I actually need less sleep and still feel refreshed when I wake. And so that has a added benefit of, allowing me to, do some more work, improve my productivity. So that's something that I wasn't expecting, but, it's been a interesting benefit to me, at least in terms of my work and my business.
That's really phenomenal, and that it happened over time, that you've noticed these improvements. So can you tell me more about how you can be of service to your clients to help them with their sleep issues?
Yeah, so if you want to experience some of these sleep benefits for yourself, this energy, the Trivedi effect, may actually help you. So I would recommend that you go to my website, johnksuzuki.com, and contact me or sign up to receive these energy transmissions now so that you can experience improved sleep quality.
Well, thank you so much, John. You really gave me and the audience a ton of information, and you brought in some information that I had not heard before related to how your brain is affected, what's going on with your brain while you sleep, because again, our bodies are miracles and they do so many things that we're not even aware of all the things. All we know is that, we sleep and we sleep better in the dark, that humans, like you said, humans just go by, it's dark, so therefore we go to bed. And it's very interesting that our bodies are perfectly in sync to the natural way the world works and everything. So before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it. I thank you for having the opportunity to speak to you today about this issue of sleep. And, it's a very important issue that I think that we really need to pay attention to. And I think it's going to be more important because of the high incidence of chronic illness that we're seeing now in, all over the world. So thank you for the opportunity for having me, here today and to discuss this important issue.
Well, I really appreciate it. And like I said, I learned a lot. So everybody go check out johnksuzuki.com. You can take a look at the information there about John, about the Trivedi effect and the science that he's participated in. And of course, there's a lot of testimonials, FAQs, and more information. So everyone go check out johnksuzuki.com. This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to today's top health and wellness innovators and thought leaders on Optimal Health Radio. To get more solid health and wellness information, visit optimalhealthradio.com.